So I don't know if anyone really remembers, but a couple of weeks ago, day after Valentine's Day, you and I, great duo we are, Stelios, decided to talk about how modding dating is an absolute disaster. And when I took a cursory scroll through the comments, because I like replying to people, I'll do the same on this video, I saw someone accusing me of watching a channel called Fresh and Fit. Are you familiar with this channel?
I have watched clips.
So I didn't know who they were. I do now, and I hate it, right? Okay? It's basically Sigma male grind set, red pill, banal dating advice. The kind of stuff that they've learned from Andrew Tate, who learned that from Patrice O'Neill, who regurgitated it not nearly as better from Patrice O'Neill. And we've done Patrice O'Neill videos on our website, so go check that out. While unfortunately instantiating the horocracy of OnlyFans models in the economy, because if you notice, the premise of the channel is they get a bunch of OnlyFans girls who no one's ever heard of before to sit in a room and talk to them about dating advice and about how sleeping around is bad, but they don't ever actually challenge the economic structure which keeps these attractive bimbos in place as a parasite sapping in a parasocial relationship the money of beta males, and also it ensnares the kind of resentful men who want to be alphas into watching this content because they think, haha, I'm dunking on this woman, but the fact that you're paying money into the show and giving it advertiser bucks anyway is paying for these awful women to come on here, so it's perpetuating the whore economy. So you're never going to break the cycle of hookup culture and OnlyFans and pernicious, addictive garbage that women would rather go to rather than have a wholesome relationship with content like this, right? Because I mean, look at the thumbnails. But this is a parallel podcast. This is called Whatever. My attention was drawn to this from two sources. One, Callum's been watching it and he knows much more about it. I'm sure he'll do a segment at some point. But two, you get their tweets all over Twitter, and they've been sort of organically marketed by the amount of people sharing their clips from TikTok and the like. And they have the same thing on their terrible thumbnails. I mean, it's just borderline pornographic, and they have the same premise of inviting OnlyFans models on there, and guys will pay super chats to shoot questions or insults at them. So it feels cathartic for you in the moment, but you're still funding the horocracy. But every once in a while, there's a little bit of wisdom that comes from the existential Cali girl accented screaming of the girls that go on this podcast. And so I wanted to take you through a couple of clips here just to illustrate the complete miserable emotional desert, the digital purgatory of Generation Z, me, I suppose, trying to date. So let's listen to the first girl who articulates the problem with modern male and female interactions. Let's play.
If I went on a date with a guy who's single and he's not fucking any other girls, then I would be like, well, why isn't he? Like, what's wrong with him?
So exclusivity is no longer a concept for lots of women, because they take it as your ability to sleep with lots of women alongside me is a marker of your high status, and therefore, if I'm just going to hypergamously trade up the value hierarchy in earnings and desirability, then I've got the best I can because I know because you're shagging all my friends. That seems to me a very unhealthy way of picking a mate.
It's very unhealthy, and I mean, it's silly.
Yeah.
Well, what do they expect? Is the kind of woman that goes around saying, you know, I want the. I think, ironically, we may see this as a sign of progress. Let me elaborate. I think it's regression, but there is a realization. There is some kind of honesty, because we frequently know the kind of women who say that the kind of person they fall for is completely different from the kind of person that they say they fall for.
Yes, this is
and very frequently they do want guys like this.
Yeah, this is the hypothesis that David Buss did a paper on a little while ago and has since recanted, actually, because it wasn't replicable. But this was something that the red pill guys went onto for a while, which is men who are alpha, muscular, sexually desirable, high sociosexuality are the ones that women, exactly, the ones that women sleep with while they're at university. This is the golden penis syndrome on university campuses, where a minority of men are sleeping with the majority of women, and they settle down with the beta type family guys who are more than willing to accommodate their stepchildren or their long body counts into their relationships because they think this woman is so above me. It's what Patrice O'Neill used to say of a lady shark swims with the male shark, gets tired of not being as big as the male shark, so goes and plays with these penguins or these seals, and she's playing with her food. And oftentimes she'll ditch the penguin or seal out in the middle of the ocean and swim back to the man shark. What David Buss findings originally were summarized as of beta bucks but alpha Fs. Nice little rhyme there. Again, doesn't have any foundation in evolutionary psychology, didn't bear it out, but it's an interesting dichotomy to try and think about.
But I think my point gives you another pass.
Go for it.
And I think you will definitely like it. There is an interesting point to be made about the fact that she does not feel ashamed when she says this.
Well,
So
she
there is
will. She
also
will.
on the one hand, there is a realization and a kind of honesty that this is what I'm looking for. But on the other hand, there is a sad thing to be said about people not feeling that there is something wrong with it.
Well, not just something wrong with it, but you have no timeline as to how your expedient desires will play out long term, because you are going to actively make yourself less desirable to the kind of man that will look after you as your sexual desirability fades away with the inevitable passing of time. And also, you will not have any children to take care of you when you're old and nobody to hold your hand when you die. It's a long 40 years after 40 if you've just ridden the cock carousel so much that you can't settle down. And for women, divorce is dick dose dependent because of the amount of oxytocin that you emit when you sleep with someone. Over time, if you sleep with too many partners, you build up to that a tolerance like you would with any other drug. And so you get utterly miserable the more people you sleep with. You get unable to pair bond properly. And that's the bedrock of a good relationship. And that is what I think this woman, whose clip went around Twitter like wildfire and was utterly mocked for her terrible accent and her inarticulateness, was trying to get at. She was trying to get at the emotional vagrancy, the soullessness, the lack of commitment, and the kind of talking-only purgatory that Gen Z dating is trapped in. Let's play this clip. Warning, it is a little annoying, but she's right.
I think like the biggest thing that like annoys me in like the whole dating world is like fucking talking stages. Like that shit's so annoying. Like the whole like, and just like the inconsistency in them. Like I literally like hate that like so much. But I think that's like my biggest thing. It's just like
what specifically?
Just like the fact of just like you like, I don't know how to word this. Like in like talking stages, and it's just like you're like labeled that, and it's like people like are considered like you can't like, you're just like confused, and like most of the time like the girl gets like attached or something, and they like see it like it's gonna lead to a relationship, and it's always not. And it's just like, that's like my biggest thing is like I just hate the whole like how like talking stages are so like normalized. Like traditional dating does not exist in this generation.
Stelios, hello.
Yeah.
Her eyes are up here.
Yeah.
Stop it. Right. Okay. She's
What the hell is she saying?
right. Her voice is, as someone in the office once coined, auditory Medusa. But she's right. What she's referring to,
You need to make sense in order to be right or wrong.
I will translate from the woman. Right. So what she's referring to is the kind of non-committalness of dating apps and social media. So when people meet online, there's a carefully curated personality that you are presenting to each other as if you're marketing a product, right? Then you engage over text. And because you've never met this person in person, you have no obligations to not ghost them at any time that you see fit. You have no investment, so you can just mutually part as long as you're not meeting each other's needs. And the interesting thing is as well, is that people will openly manipulate this more, or not openly, covertly manipulate this more, because if you change or set restrictions on the length of text, the frequency of text, who texts first, how many topics you can talk about, what's off limits, it all becomes very arbitrary and stifled. And so you never feel you're actually developing an intimate connection with someone.
Do I get the sense that you're trying to interpret her very charitably?
No, I
And
think
you
she's
want her
dead
to
right.
you want her to be the prophet of your movement.
No, and I'm not building a movement or anything, but my point is, I have heard this from plenty of other people. This is why I don't use dating apps, for example. And this isn't even necessarily my experience, because when I've had girlfriends, I've spoken to them at length just because, funnily enough, I can talk. I kind of do it for a job. But lots of people feel unsatisfied because there is a kind of misunderstanding as to when is the right time to broach a date. Most people our generation have been raised on screens. Well, I say our generation, you're about 10 years older than me, but most people have been raised on screens, don't know when to get off them. They don't know when to take it into real life. And so all they ever do is go through swiping. Oh, I got a match. Okay, well, we'll talk for a little bit. And I don't know if he likes me enough to want to take me out. I like him enough, but I don't want to tell him that I like him enough because I might scare him off. So all you end up doing is being so afraid of commitment, you never commit to anyone. and you die alone. And that is what that girl's articulating. She's saying, we never move beyond the talking stage. It's just talking. There's no action.
There is also another thing. I think it's a kind of way to approach the idea of autonomy, where people think that the supreme ideal is to be completely independent in your whole life. Now, in some case, of course, independence is important, but if we look at what makes life valuable, we will see that it is entirely relational to the idea of dependence, because in being a friend to someone, in being married to someone, in being a father or mother to someone, all of these are relations of dependence.
Yeah.
And all of these are relations that for the overwhelming majority of humanity has said that they make their lives better.
I can say...
I think maybe young people nowadays may disagree because they have this fear of becoming dependent to another person. But this is what life is.
I think it's a fear of vulnerability, often because they haven't reconciled their own personal issues, and so they don't want the other person's judgment to be held up like a mirror to them to confirm all of their insecurities about themselves. But I can personally say, and I'm no perfect person, but one of my main life goals, it is the apotheosis of all I want, is to be a husband and a father someday. And some people really don't have that life goal articulated out. They're just sort of nebulously bobbing, but they do have that deep need for emotional attachment. And so that fear of being rejected, the interfacing with kind of artificial digital mediums to create relationships, and lack of understanding as to the timeline of when you should have a family has created this paradoxal parasocialism of where you don't want to be dependent on anyone, but lots of people are dependent on things like OnlyFans to get their emotional fix vicariously. It's really sad.
And that's, in a sense, bad faith on their part, because they don't understand they do become hooked. They do become dependent on something that is not beneficial to them.
Yeah, and at least she was honest, even if she was slightly dim, about the existential pain she's in about not being able to find a man to commit to her. And this is why I wanted to bring up this meme. You ever seen the IQ mid-wit bell curve? So if we go to scroll down, John, just the image, if we have one. I don't know if it's in here. Yeah, so it's an explanation that at the lowest end and the highest end of IQ bell curves, you reach the same conclusion. And that is that someone just acting on their intuition that hasn't properly thought it out properly has the same ability to come to the same conclusion as someone who pulls apart the tradition into its component parts and says, this is why the tradition exists. Whereas only the midwits in the middle don't get it. So it's like, no, I can be happy on my own, no, and that's the midwits. Whereas the enlightened person and the dumb person, like that lovely looking girl there, came to the same conclusion of, yeah, digital society and its consequences have been a disaster for human dating. And she's right. And if we go to the next article just briefly, that's why, just to add some data on from our last segment, now another study's come out saying about 2/3 of Generation Z wishes they weren't on dating apps, but they feel they have to use them because they feel it's the only way to meet people. And I think we can see this in the next TikTok that I'm going to subject you to, because you like torturing me offline with all sorts of TikToks during the day, of a Japanese immigrant who's come to America and articulates her experience dating in the American context as completely alien to traditional ways of dating that have worked for hundreds of years. Let's play.
Did you know we don't really have a talking stage in Japan, but we do in America, right? So I was like kind of ready to experience like, some cultural differences in terms of dating when I first started going out with this guy that I met online. We hung out like 5 times before I went to his house for the first time. Yeah, and everything was fine, and he was nice and we were having fun, so I went there. And his parents and his grandma was there, and I was like freaking out because in Japan this doesn't happen that much. If you do this in Japan, it's like you're marrying that person, or like you're in a real serious relationship with that person. It's like, you make a fine, you're in America, so this is maybe not a big deal. So I calmed myself down and I introduced myself to his family, and they were all nice. His dad even asked me if I am thinking of coming back to America so that I can stay with him like longer. So I didn't really ask him like what we are or anything, but like we were not in a relationship. I was like pretty happy about it until I found out that he just wanted to be friends with me. I was like, excuse me, like I didn't get mad or anything. I was like just curious, like what he was thinking about the whole time. We were on the couch and like I asked me like, what's with you? He was like, I've been like focusing on myself. He was like, I am insecure about the past relationship, so I don't want to have anything super serious. Like And this dating app that we met on, that had like settings that you can put what you're looking for. And we both put that we were looking for a relationship. That's how we met and how we matched. So I felt so disrespected and I got lied because like he should have put I don't know or something. So yeah, I blocked him and I hated him. But like I had this second thought, why don't I use him for a bit?
So I decided to use him as a transportation system since he had a car. I'm not a bitch like this, but this time I was pissed.
So I started texting him again. So we hung out like twice after that like thing. And the last time before I was leaving, he was like, you know, we've been hanging out pretty long and I was thinking of like asking you if you want to become my girlfriend or something, and I said no. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna become friends with guys first and I'm gonna become one of friends after that. But like, how are you guys doing it? I don't know.
I think women nowadays who follow this, they hang together and they treat dating as a war campaign. They have a map in front of them. Maybe they have satellites and they say, there's a boyfriend here, there's another person there, there's another. Let us find the best way to, and they have alternative A, B, C, D, you know, whatever. And they make a really careful calculations of the pros and cons of each alternative.
All out of fear of losing. You artificially control the pace and direction of the relationship out of fear of rejection, and so it stops you from ever committing. And if you noticed, that woman there went from, this is a completely alien way of doing it, to, I'm going to adopt this way of doing it, to, I'm going to become a manipulative thief that's only using men for their time and resources. In the space of one interaction with the American dating scene, she became the worst kind of hypergamous parasite.
And to add to what I was saying before about the feeling of shame, she doesn't feel shame in publicly stating this.
Exactly, yeah, because all of the incentive structures of the culture keep this going.
Exactly.
And that culture is Simone de Beauvoir's. If you'd like to pay £5 a month and watch all of our premium content, which I really recommend you do, this is one of the favourite bits of content I've ever done, was with Carl, The Evil Origins of Feminism, where for 2 hours I subjected him to quotes from Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, and it explains literally everything about the mess we are in today. We're living in Simone de Beauvoir's world. Do you feel empowered, ladies? Now, I wanted to use another example here, please.
I have said that I watched it and it was a really good conversation.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. I guess.
Thank you for reading it.
Yeah, it's 900 pages. It's probably the worst book I ever read. So I guess pay my wages because I torture myself. I wanted to use an example of that controlling pace out of fear that was published in the Mail recently. I put my boyfriend on probation and it might have saved our relationship.
Do you give a notice period or something? Yes.
You put an ankle monitor on him, so if he goes near another woman, it goes off. You put him in the sin bin. So this woman decided, because they had certain incompatibilities in their personality, to break up with her boyfriend and say, go away and come back to me with your stuff fixed. Now, I understand the desire to want to iron out your incompatibilities in a long-term relationship, but that doesn't necessary the need to break apart and split, especially because once you dismantle that moral prohibitions against splitting, then that means that's a crutch you can fall back on at any time.
Okay, I think I'm linking the pieces now because they were saying that they want some guy who sees other people. I think they use it as a referencing system.
How so?
Because they are going to say, well, do you have any references to date me?
Oh, okay.
And
so
they're
as well,
going to give the email or contact details of each lady, and they're going to ask, how was this guy?
Also, as well, if the break is instigated and other women show him interest in the meantime, that's validation for her that she's got a high value man. So that's very clever. I can see that. But my point is, don't try and artificially distance yourself from emotion and try and figure out your problems while you're in a relationship, because this isn't how it was historically done. Before, men and women struggled together despite adverse conditions, in sickness and in health, in death to us part, and we were much happier, rather than trying to micromanage and utopian social plan our relationships towards this platonic ideal of soulmate romance. No, instead, we come together and we work out our problems with commitment as the underlying axiom that never gets questioned. That if you don't get to break up more than once, that's just it. It shouldn't be an option on the table. So I wanted to go to instead my dream. If we're going through female TikToks, I'm a traditional housewife and I love spending hours cooking and cleaning for my husband. I'm subservient to him in a healthy way. And the reason I brought this up is the same reason I brought up the Simone de Beauvoir podcast earlier. Women have been pathologized against dependency, as you said. Now, men are dependent on women for their emotional support. Definitely. They're dependent on women in order to raise their children, in order to, as well, if men just earn money, what do we spend it on? Like, there's only so many books I can buy, or there's that meme of how do men live like this? They live on a inflatable mattress with no duvet cover on the floor in the middle of the room with a TV on the floor and maybe an empty pizza box. Like, we want to earn money to facilitate you guys having a good time, you guys being our wife and kids. So that dependency for us is for emotional support on you. Just because you were to financially depend on your man doesn't mean you're doing any unpaid labor, or you're a parasite, or you're somehow subservient in some kind of manipulative or imbalanced power dynamic way. No, we're complementary and we want to take care of you. And that's why I ended up tweeting the following, which is just that, if we can go on to the next one, please, John. Men will literally work their entire lives just to make so that you can have this lifestyle as long as you're just pretty and nice. It's not that difficult. You haven't got to be an OnlyFans thought. You haven't got to spend endlessly talking digitally. You haven't got to have a curated profile. Get offline. Go and meet someone. Be virtuous, be kind, and be unafraid of loving someone. And so I thought I'd finish on plugging this Thursday, Stelios' series, Symposium, which is brilliant, by the way.
Thank you.
Stelios and I made my debut on your corner of the Isle of the Lotus Eaters, discussing the philosophical and even theological at times definitions of love, and we come to a really wholesome place. This is a really white pilling segment. Didn't look at the clock once the entire time we discussed it, and I think we ironed it down to you're only able to recognize love if you meet and deeply connect with a person and you are both virtuous, but that requires a level of vulnerability that requires you to be honest with the person. And I wanted to just finish with, I don't think you can have that honesty by presenting someone a commodified version of you through a dating app. Get offline, talk in person, fall in love, get married, and have wholesome lives, ladies and gents.
Remember Elvis Presley with a little less conversation, a little more action.
It's brilliant.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the premium articles, this one on Cambridge's colossal lack of judgment and Eton's woke mess, with an audio track for silver and gold tier listeners, of course. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, it's on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.